And Governor Romney says he's got a 5-point plan. Governor Romney doesn't have a 5-point plan. He has a 1-point plan.
He said that I said we should take Detroit bankrupt. And that's right. My plan was to have the company go through bankruptcy like 7-Eleven did and Macy's and Continental Airlines and come out stronger.
Round two goes to the incumbent. At least that's what initial polling says after the second presidential debate saw Barack Obama put in a stronger performance. Round three takes place next Monday in Florida with foreign policy the subject. Here in Europe, meanwhile, Spain dodged a bullet last night when Moody's decided not to downgrade it to junk. For more on that and the US, let's get to Gareth Isaac, Senior Fixed Income Portfolio Manager at Schroders. Morning to you, Gareth. How do you position, let's start with the US, how do you position ahead of this election, especially when you've got the Fed on the sidelines?
Yeah, it's a very difficult time for sort of fixed income investors because you have the fiscal cliff coming up in January and we're not exactly sure what's going to happen there. I mean, if you did get that sort of hit of 4 to 5% of GDP, it would be pretty traumatic to the global economy, especially with the backdrop of China slowing and the US and the UK and Europe in a little bit of trouble. So we're sort of hoping that the politicians come together and try and resolve that issue before the crunch time, although if history is anything to go by, that's probably not likely.
So what are you buying in the US right now?
Well, in the US, I mean, with the Fed buying almost everything that's available in the fixed income market, it's difficult to see yields rising. So we have a pretty neutral position in the US. It's the same with most of the bond markets in the UK and in Europe, that you have marginal buyers like central banks that are buying government bonds. So it's difficult to see yields rising a great deal, although at these levels they're not particularly good value.
As we see more calls for less austerity in Europe, how's that going to change the investment landscape, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's great for the IMF to say, let's have less austerity, but it seems to have been the mantra from core Europe for some considerable time. So to see them pull back from that would be a little surprising at this stage. Although, if you look at the data, cutting into what are very difficult times is probably not going to generate you some growth. So we are hoping that there is a little bit more sort of a reality shock to the situation, and that governments look for some more pro-growth policies as well as the austerity measures to cut the structural deficit.
Are you surprised that that they didn't get junk from Moody's, Spain?
No, not really. I mean, to us, if Spain can borrow at what are now pretty attractive levels with the ECB as a backstop, and without any seniority issues, then it seemed to us that, you know, Spain, although they're going through a difficult time, they should be growing again by 2015, and their debt trajectory is somewhat better than many countries. So we didn't think that at this stage, given our outlook, that they should be downgraded to junk.
I know you've liked, as have many, corporate and high yield. Has that turned now, given the rally?
I mean, they've done very well. We've seen a very strong rally again this morning. I mean, if you're looking at where interest rates are and deposit rates are very, very low, then investors are looking for a home to generate more income and more yield. But we do think that much of the spread contraction is probably done here, and it's more of a carry game. And that's a little bit dangerous, because we saw historically when people are just investing for carry that can be quite dangerous when liquidity gets taken out of the market.
All right, Gareth, many thanks.
You're welcome.
Other headlines on Reuters this morning. ASML says earnings were in line with forecasts for the third quarter. The world's top chip equipment maker also issuing new shares to help fund a takeover of US tech firm Cyma. And BHP Billiton pressing ahead with plans to boost iron ore output, even as doubts linger over Chinese demand. The world's biggest miner now says it sees China growing at 7 to 8% in the coming years. Business pages full of Vikram Pandit's surprise departure from Citi, of course. Let me show you a few of those now. This is the FT. Pandit quits Citi after board clashes, their headline. Same photograph in the Telegraph. This morning, Citigroup chief Pandit quits after clash in boardroom. Pretty much the same headline there as well. Times goes with something a little bit different, and indeed goes with a different picture. Citigroup boss pays price after showdown with board. It's this piece down here. A look at the next guy that the focus is on, of course, Pandit's successor, Michael Corbat, up until yesterday, head of Citi's operations in Europe, Middle East and Africa. He has the reputation, according to the Times, of being Citi's repairman. According to the paper, his nickname within the bank, the Senator, a result of his diplomatic and gentlemanly manner. Apple supplier Foxconn back in the firing line today after admitting it used underage workers. Reuters' Tara Joseph joins us from Hong Kong. What's the latest on this, Tara?
As you mentioned, Axel, Foxconn under fire once again, this time for hiring underage workers, which are called interns. They're actually students who go and work in the factory. But this time, Foxconn fessed up to it itself. They said they found workers as young as 14 years of age putting things together on the assembly lines and said this is a problem and it must be fixed. They also, though, did backtrack and say this is a very small percentage, very, very small percentage of its workforce. But it does go back to the problem of labor in China and the fact that a lot of younger workers really don't want to go work in the factories anymore. And Foxconn, like many other companies, is having a difficult time recruiting. But this story just won't go away for Foxconn. They are constantly under scrutiny over their labor practices.
All right. And before we let you go, there's a poll catching your eye as well. Tell us more about this.
That's right. It's the Pew Global Attitudes poll on China. And it's interesting because it is a rare glimpse into public opinion just weeks ahead of the leadership transition. Perhaps not surprisingly, people are very worried about corruption in China. Up to 50% of those surveyed worried about corruption in politics and in business. One of the new concerns is over food safety among the population as they hear about food scares. And the biggest worry, inflation, that still continues to linger. We've seen economic indicators showing that inflation is down, but this is a very sensitive subject in China. People worried about having enough money to buy food, still number one concern.
Many thanks, Tara. That is it for this morning. I'll leave you with our pick of the day. Questions being asked after England's World Cup qualifier against Poland was called off due to heavy rain. The Warsaw Stadium has a roof, but organisers chose not to close it despite the forecast of downpours, hence our picture. I'm Axel Threlfall. This is Reuters.